What's up, guys? Ethan Rowe here. Sorry it's a little bit late, but as promised, I'm giving y'all my review for the Netflix original that came out in 2017 called Gerald's Game. Gerald's Game is a story that came out by Stephen King and was directed by Mike Flanagan. Mike Flanagan is the one who does Hush, Oculus, and the great 90s hit that everyone knows is I Know What You Did Last Summer. And my overall consensus for Gerald's Game is I love the movie. I absolutely love the movie. And I will give y'all my in-depth review on it in here in just a second. Alright, Gerald's Game. Gerald's Game stars Carla Gugino and Bruce Greenwood. And to get right down to it, we're going to talk about this. I'm going to go very in-depth into this movie. More in-depth into a movie review than I have ever done. So, here we go. Carla Gugino's character, which is named Jessie in the movie, she shows a lot of emotion in this movie. A very broad range, if you will. She shows a lot of fear. She shows remorse, anger, regret, a little bit of happiness, which is very rare for a Stephen King movie. And Bruce Greenwood's character, title of the movie, Gerald, he is interesting, to say the least, in this movie. He is very interesting. So, to get right down to it, we're going to go pretty much step by step of the movie and what I think about it. So, to get right down to it, we're going to start at the beginning. Where else to start it? Unless if you Tarantino it, go start at the end, and then start at the beginning, and then work your way back to the end, and it's just one big crazy mess. But, Tarantino, he does his own thing. But, not to get off track, the movie picks up pretty much right as soon as they're starting to pack for their Gerald's and Jessie's getaway. It's like they're trying to rekindle the relationship, if you will, because something happened between them, and they're going to have like a little getaway, try to work things out. And pretty much immediately they're driving down the road, and they're greeted by a dog in the middle of the road who is pretty much eating roadkill, because this dog is hungry. You could tell it's a pitiful looking dog. And immediately Jess, or Jessie, she takes kindly to this dog. She feels for this dog. And of course Gerald's trying to brush it off like it's nothing, just trying to get it out of the way so they can get to the house. Or I think it's a cabin, maybe a little bit of both, I don't know. But whenever they get to the house, Jessie, she is calling for the dog because they have steaks, $200 a portion, Kobe. But she's trying to call for the dog because she don't want the dog to go hungry. And pretty much right after that, it starts to take place into the bedroom, or what as I call the beginning of the end, or downward spiral. And you go to Gerald immediately taking a pill called ED, or Viagra for his ED. Somebody can't get it up. Oh well, age happens. But I think that's what takes place later, a little bit later into the movie. But for now, Gerald brings out these handcuffs, and you can immediately tell that Jessie is very hesitant about this, because she's just very cut off, and she looks shut off from him. It looks like she's really not that into him anymore, honestly. And he puts the handcuffs on her, and it starts to be really, really weird. Like, my first instinct was that Gerald was very weird at first. Like, almost cringy type weird, in my opinion. Because he was wanting her to call him daddy, and had this weird fantasy, and that just doesn't roll very well. And she refuses it, and she doesn't like it at all. And next thing you know, Gerald has a heart attack. And my thing is, I think he had a heart attack. It was like not an out of spite things, because he took a Viagra. Because you have to ask your doctor or whatever, because that does take a toll on your heart. But suddenly he has a heart attack and just falls on top of her while she's laying handcuffed to this bed. And immediately, whenever I first watched this movie, I was like, well, can't you just break off with break off the bedpost where the handcuffs are chained at? Apparently not, because he mentions later that the poles are reinforced, so they must be pretty strong. But before we get into all that, I do want to say that this movie is beautiful. And by that, I mean it is shot so well. And like the mood and the atmosphere that they captured in this movie. And it's like you could tell that everything was very isolated in this movie. And just the way that the color was displayed, and like scene by scene, like you had your reds, you had your yellows, you had your grays, you had your blues, but they're all placed in a very specific spot, or like on the actor or actress's face, and just to display the type of mood. Like in one shot where she's first handcuffed to the bed and he just died and she's calling out for help. The way that scene is shot, it's kind of like a bluish, grayish type deal, and you could tell that there's panic in the air. And it's just the way that this movie was shot, and especially with the eclipse scene, to where I will get to later. But overall, this movie is one of the most beautiful movies I have ever seen, just by the way it was shot. I don't know who the cinematographer is for this movie, but I would definitely be looking that up, because he did a great job. And so did Mike Flanagan directing this movie. But anyways, I just want to make a point. That damn dog bugged the shit out of me. Like, he kept coming back for more. But I mean, I get it. That dog was hungry. It's a wild dog. He's looking for anything that he can eat. But I mean, you could tell right from the get-go that that dog was going to play a contributing factor into this movie, because the way that whenever everything kept progressing into her madness and into her situation, into the danger, the dog became more and more dangerous. But anyways, on from that. The pacing was great in this movie. I thought that slow build with the tension, that was portrayed very well. That's one thing I really like in horror movies, especially in psychological horror movies. You have to portray that tension through a slow build. You can't just go balls to the wall at first and then, like tell your story. You have to tell your story through that slow build. And the tension in the movie, like the more you got into it, there was a little bit more that you learned, and then they'll give you just a little bit more, and then you learn a little bit more, and they'll just give you a little bit more. And that was done very well, phenomenally. And then what really is creepy about this movie is the Moonlight Man. Or it turns out the Moonlight Man, you think he is kind of like supernatural, maybe at first, kind of like a supernatural being that comes to haunt you in stressful, traumatizing situations, because he collects bones and jewelry from his victims. But, she starts to see the Moonlight Man on the first night that she is handcuffed to the bed. And she's freaked out about it, but she claims that it is not real, which will come into a play later. After that, you get a glimpse into her backstory. But before we get into that, I just want to mention that the hallucinations by Carla Gugino's Jesse and Bruce Greenwood's Gerald, those hallucinations of them, fantastic. The way they interacted with each other and talking to the real Jesse, the one who's handcuffed to the bed, it's just Gerald. It's kind of like an angel and devil type deal on your shoulders. Jesse's, I guess you could say, mind was playing the angel character with her, and in her mind, the devil was Gerald, telling her all this crazy, effed up crap that, what can happen to her or what's going to happen. And Jesse's angel, that was Jesse, talking to her, was telling her, kind of like, you can do this. This is what you need to do. It's going to hurt, but you can do this. And you can't stop. You'll know what I mean later by that. But I just want to say that those performances, just overall, I can't get enough of, because that is by far one of the best acting I have seen, ever. And I'm not exaggerating that. That is, I couldn't do it. I get nervous just trying to talk to you guys. So, but thus we get into the backstory of Jesse. And I actually made quite a few notes on this, because just the way this backstory was explained, because you could already tell that Jesse was messed up psychologically a little bit. Even though she tried her best not to show it, it still showed just a little bit. Even though Gerald was probably oblivious to it, but we as an audience could tell just by her facial movements, just by the way she expressed herself. And in this backstory, it all boils down to whenever her and her family, whenever she was younger, I guess she was about 12 years old, they all went to a lake house for this eclipse, this total solar eclipse that was going to happen. And they were all going to go out into the lake, but little Jessie, she wasn't really feeling like it, so her dad opted to stay behind and watch her while the eclipse was happening, and let the mom and the rest of the kids go out onto the lake. And by the way, that mom was a complete and total bitch. I don't know if she was a stepmom or a real mom. I don't know. I didn't like her. I don't think nobody liked her. But yeah, she was a bitch. Anyways, getting back on point, we go to little Jessie sitting on the bench right next to the lake, and she has this, I guess it's solar eclipse glasses, but they look kind of like binoculars in a way, just so that she can actually look at the sun while the eclipse is happening. Because you never want to look at an eclipse with your bare eyes. I've seen that on the internet. But anyways, her dad comes and sits right beside her, and he's just saying all these weird things to her about how when she was little, she used to sit on his lap, and how whenever that she can't really sit on his lap anymore because she's all grown. And you can just tell right away that this dude is sick. He is a twisted mother effer, if you will. I just censor myself right there because I'm only allowing myself just a couple F words. But anyways, the dad is a total piece of shit. I mean, just right from the get-go. But in a way, he is written so you will hate him. So the story did very well of that. You hated him for a very good reason. It gave a good explanation why you hate a character, and it gave a good explanation of why you really feel for Jesse later on into the movie, and how it explained her backstory. And it just, this story, it gets very, very deep. It almost as deep of a level as Pet Sematary, and like the original, and in ways that it describes trauma and how your past can come back to haunt you in a way. And it deals with grief. It deals with, like, trying to come to terms with your emotions, with your past, with everything that comes with trauma, psychological trauma at that. And it's like, no wonder she has issues as an adult, because while she was trying to watch the eclipse, she was sitting in her daddy's lap and he started touching himself. And that's just, that's enough to drive any little child insane, especially a little girl, a 12-year-old girl, because she's going to feel all these things that I can't even comprehend. That's just very, very messed up. And it's just, she kept all that in for years and years. She never told it to anybody, especially her husband, because she said it wasn't relevant to us. And I can understand why she would keep it, bottled all the way down, but there comes a certain point in time to where, you have to talk to somebody. And, you could tell, I guess, the hallucination of Gerald. He was just like, well, why didn't you talk to me about this? And she just, it's like, I didn't want to talk about it, because she said she doesn't talk about that. And it also went on to explain why she doesn't talk about it, because she literally made a promise to her dad that she would never talk about it. If they wouldn't tell her mom, they would never talk about it to anyone, especially friends or period, anyone. And she literally took that to heart. And transitioning now, and she finally remembers what to do, or like how to survive, because her backstory comes into a play on how she is going to survive. As she ends up remembering at dinner later that night, after the traumatic thing happened, she remembers that she was at dinner and her mom was talking about, I think she said, did you have a good day with your father? And she was holding a glass, like a glass she drank out of, and she ended up squeezing it so hard that it broke, and she had a cut on her hand. And that played into a fact where whenever she had the glass of water on top of the shelf, the one she could barely reach, and she ended up, like, that's whenever I said about earlier, whenever the angel side of Jesse was talking to her, it's like, this is going to hurt. Like, yeah, she was going to cut her own hand to try to slip out of the handcuffs. And boy, by God, was that brutal. And I'm all about, showing a little bit or not showing at all, because of the theater of the mind. But I actually did not mind this, because it just added to the fear and to the pain of what she was going through. It just made it much more intense. And it's just the way whenever she was pulling her hand out of that handcuff, it's like you could see all that. And props to the makeup department on that. And it's like you could see like the tendons and the bone whenever she was pulling her hand out of that handcuff and finally got it out, and all that loose skin. It was just very graphic indeed. And then she proceeds to try to get out of the house. She finds the keys, to the handcuff and finds the keys to the car as well. And whenever she's heading out, who does she run into? The Moonlight Man. And she offers her wedding ring because he's holding that little treasure chest that he has open. I guess, to try to intimidate her, or I guess it was just wanting jewelry. But anyway, she puts her wedding ring into that treasure chest, and then she just bolts out. Of course, you still think he's supernatural at this point, and she just offered it up just to try to leave. And then, while she's driving, Lord, you'd think you'd have like just a little bit of self-control while driving, even if you go through all that traumatic stuff. But I mean, I guess I get it in a way, because she was very dehydrated. She lost a lot of blood, and she was very, very tired. So she ends up passing out behind the wheel and runs head first into a tree. And I must say, that character really lucked up, because she ended up crashing pretty much right in front of a house, and she was fortunate enough to where they heard it, and they come to her rescue. And then it flashes forward, I think 6 months after the incident, and she's recovering from it. She says she had 3 skin grafts on her hand, and it still doesn't work right. Excuse me. And it still doesn't work right. And it comes to find out that the Moonlight Man was actually real, because he suffered from some type of disease. I cannot remember for the life of me what that disease is called, but it causes like a bulge into the head, like the forehead, and it caused abnormally large arms and legs to where it just makes him taller and a little bit bigger than the average human being would be. And it's just, before I get to the ending part of that, just the way that she overcame her fear of that Moonlight Man, and the way she dealt with that trauma and with that grief and everything was, I don't know, it was just very beautifully written. And just whenever she went to confront her monster into that courtroom, and then she's like, "You're much, much smaller than I remember," and then just walked away. It's like his expression, the Moonlight Man's expression, like completely changed. Like, oh, she's not scared of me anymore. It's like, no, nobody's scared of me anymore. And that was great. And whenever she's walking down the road, it shows the sun, and you can tell like the eclipse is like just fading away from the sun. It just shows that her eclipse is finally over, and it all comes full circle. And it's like she can actually move on from her past. She can actually move on from the tragedy that happened to her and in that bedroom that day and that night. So that is my full in-depth review for Gerald's Game, and I'm gonna start giving my reviews and the movies that I talk about rankings from here on out. So, and I'm very particular whenever I give a movie a rating. I consider all things and try to come up with the rating after that. And I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. I thought this movie was damn near flawless. And the only flaw I really have in this movie was just how awkward Gerald was in the beginning. That, honestly, how awkward he was, it almost took me out of the movie, concentrating on the movie. But that was over real quick. And the actor that played Bruce, it was Bruce Greenwood, the actor who played Gerald. I mean, he did a phenomenal job, and he was only doing what was given to him on paper in the beginning, and he did a great job. Don't get me wrong, he did a great job portraying that character, but it was just awkward. And I watched this movie with my parents just earlier, and it was just during that whole part before everything went down. It was a little awkward watching it with them. What's up, guys? And but yeah, anyways, movie is great. It's a damn near flawless movie, and I would definitely recommend this movie to anyone who's curious in any Stephen King type movie, or just in a psychological horror movie in general. This is pretty much an almost trapped on an island movie for me. I would watch it anytime, any day. Like, no questions asked. My mom was laughing in the room just next door. I don't know what she's laughing about, but I can hear her because things echo in here. But anyways, guys, my name is Ethan Rowe. Be on the lookout for my Halloween timeline video tomorrow. I was going to have it up this weekend, but I'm lazy. But I will have a very special guest with me tomorrow in my Halloween timeline video. And I will have my Star Wars trailer thoughts coming up here shortly. So stick around for that. All right, bye.